everyone, thank you guys so much for joining me for another episode of Makeup and Wake Up. If you have been keeping up with the series, I just want to let you know I am so appreciative of your commitment and support throughout this series. I really appreciate it. If this happens to be your first episode that you're watching, thank you so much for being here. As always, I leave links to other episodes and the Makeup and Wake Up playlist in the description bar, along with any other resources having to do with the episode topic, always in the description bar, so definitely go ahead and check that out. Today's episode, we are going to be focusing on unethical farming. I do have an episode of Makeup and Wake Up on environmental racism, which I think will be really interesting to you either after you watch this video, or maybe if you even want to watch the environmental racism first and then return back to the unethical farming episode. Either way, I think you should consider watching the environmental racism episode if unethical farming is of any interest to you, because unethical farming has a lot to do with environmental injustices. So let's just get started in today's video. So if you're ever at the store and you are wondering how food can be so cheap sometimes, for example, like fruits and eggs, like people can get a dozen eggs for 90 cents. And I'm sure, you know, it varies depending on where you're living. But because of factory farming, we are able to get produce for pretty cheap and affordable. However, we pay for that through the cruelty of animals, people, and our land. So there are so many disgusting and graphic details surrounding the poor treatment of animals, but I'm not going to go over those too much in today's video. However, I really encourage you to watch some documentaries and videos on the treatment of animals inside factory farms, and I will leave examples of that down below. Instead, for today's video, I will be focusing on factory farming as a whole and why it is so bad and why we should know about where our food comes from. So the first factory farmed animal was the chicken in the 1920s, and then in the 1960s we started seeing other animals become factory farmed. First starting with the cows and then the pigs. And factory farming really just existed to meet the demands of feeding people. When factory farming first started, the main argument basically was that there was a growing demand for animal products and factory farming was going to be the solution to meet those demands. While I'm blending out my concealer, I'm going to read you guys the statistics within the United States of the farm animals that we have and how many of them percentage-wise live on factory farms. 99.9% of chickens living in America live on factory farms. 98.2% of chickens that are used for their eggs live on factory farms. 70.4% of cows that live in America live on factory farms. 98.3% of pigs that live in America live on factory farms. And 99.8% of turkeys that live in America live in factory farms. The overwhelming majority of each of these animals' entire populations in the United States live on factory farms in horrible conditions just to meet the demands of their animal products. A lot of people want to argue in favor of factory farms because of our overwhelming demand for it. We need to feed the American people. We need to feed our growing population. But 45% of the world's crops go to feeding factory farmed animals. So we really have to ask, is factory farming animals really necessary for our growing population when 45% of the world's crops go towards feeding those animals when they could really go to feeding people? I think in that case there's not really so much of a demand for food at that point. We have it already. So what exactly is a factory farm? Factory farms are big operations that breed and house animals specifically for human consumption, whether that is the meat from the animal or animal byproducts like milk or goat's milk or chicken eggs. I do want to mention that veggie and fruit farming also have some problems to it. No industry is innocent when you are mass producing anything, but we are going to be focusing on factory farming as it has to do more so with animals. So overall, factory farms are built to be as efficient as possible. Factory farms are looking for the biggest profit in the fastest way possible. Unfortunately though, when you prioritize efficiency, you rule out morality. As a result of keeping factory farming as efficient as possible, a lot of animals and their workers and the land that the farms are on get abused and exploited. And I think a lot of us will naturally wonder, like, how does this go on? How does this continue? And the industrial food complex knows that the public would be or is disgusted in their practices. And food lobbying groups actually influence lawmakers to create what is called Ag-Gag laws in order to punish people that are trying to expose the gross abuse and exploitation that goes on in factory farms. So Ag-Gag laws are a legislation that is placed to specifically protect the factory farms and to hide and cover up the abuse that goes on within factory farms. Ag-Gag laws are really dangerous because they stop people from being held accountable from their actions, and they also scare protesters and activists away who are trying to expose the ugliness of factory farming. Ag-Gag laws are different between states, but there are some states in the US where people can get charged because of an Ag-Gag law and be treated as a terrorist and be charged and imprisoned for many, many years just because they are trying to expose the violence and abuse that is happening in factory farming. Ag-Gag laws prohibit people from seeing what is really going on behind the scenes and really seeing where their food is coming from. And it also makes it so corporations and the owners of these farms aren't held accountable for their actions. So just like people, animals can feel stress and anxiety and fear. And being in conditions like factory farming, a lot of times they are in confined spaces, they are in really dirty environments. They are being pumped with chemicals to make them grow larger or eating really unhealthy diets. And their lives on the factory farm isn't that long, so they don't even get to experience any comfort in their very short-lived life. And now a lot of people do try and say that they eat humane meat. They eat meat from free-range farms where they feel like the animals that they are eating were taken care of and well cared for. But humane meat actually doesn't exist while factory farming exists. And especially when you consider the statistics that I shared towards the beginning of the video, there really aren't animals that we eat in the US that don't live on factory farms. Humane meat at this point is really just a marketing tactic, and truthfully, the humane meat that you think is humane for these various different reasons really wouldn't be easily found at your local grocery store or even your local health food store like a Whole Foods. So basically, unless you own a farm yourself or you're picking up your meat maybe at a farmer's market, you probably aren't getting the humane meat that you think that you're buying, because basically all of the animals that are used for our consumption are living on factory farms. So because factory farming's main goal is efficiency, they want to be efficient in production and they want to be efficient in cost, that leaves no room in the budget for care of animals. They don't care about the animals at all in factory farming. Animals' well-being has no place in factory farming, and the well-being of workers in the industry also has no place in efficiency of factory farming. So about 48% of people who work in factory farms do not have legal authorization in the US, and only 33% of the people who work in factory farms are US citizens. So factory farming corporations are able to profit off of the fear of deportation for a lot of their workers, and they're able to use that to their advantage by forcing their workers to endure really horrible, gruesome working conditions that have even resulted in the rape of women. A lot of these workers are even forced to wear diapers so that they can continue working throughout the day without breaks. Factory farms are able to prey on these types of vulnerable people because they are unlikely to unionize organize and fight against their working conditions, like really long hours, anywhere between 10 to 15-hour days, and very, very little pay. An employee who works on a factory farm for at least 5 years has a 50% chance of getting injured while on the job, and injuries within this workplace can either consist of contracting a disease from handling animals in really unclean and dirty environments to having really serious injuries from using farm equipment. Factory farm workers also inhale a lot of chemicals, anything from ammonia to hydrogen sulfide, plus a lot of airborne bacteria, which causes many respiratory issues. In fact, 70% of people that work in factory farms have respiratory problems. Also, there are more long-term injuries that we should consider, like hands and back and leg discomfort from the physical labor that is done on factory farming. And you would think because the high risk of injury and disease and health problems, these workers would have access to healthcare. But unfortunately, a lot of these employees do not have access to healthcare, nor are they given the time off to even go see a doctor if they need. So let's talk about the communities that get destroyed because of factory farming. Factory farming doesn't only affect the workers and the animals, it also affects the people that are living around them and the land that the factory farming is on. Waste from animals is stored in these disgusting cesspools. I know in our environmental racism episode we talked about the cesspools of waste that are in North Carolina. This is happening all over the country. And because the US Environmental Protection Agency doesn't really account for air and water pollution, a lot of these farms are able to just spray the waste from these pools all over the surrounding area and land. And the land that this waste gets sprayed onto literally is in people's backyards. There are accounts of people who are saying that they get waste sprayed onto their homes. The harmful toxins and gas that get released from this waste cause a lot of health issues within the community, ranging from respiratory infections, headaches, even cancer can be a result of this. And despite the pleas from the local communities that are being affected and protesters and activists, there's really nothing that's ever been done to regulate the disposal of waste so that factory farms can stop polluting the air and water in the surrounding communities because of lobbying groups. Lobbying groups are very big, they're powerful, they're very rich, and they pump a lot of money into politicians and lawmakers' pockets so that factory farming can continue living on the way that it does and destroying the communities and the people and the animals within. Factory farms are also almost always located within low-income areas, so the residents within those communities usually can't afford to even leave, so they have to endure the horrible health effects that are caused by factory farming, and that's a true result of environmental racism. Definitely check out my episode on environmental racism and environmental justice if you want to get more information on that. So let's talk about the environmental effects of factory farming. So having to do specifically with air pollution, over 37% of methane emissions comes from factory farming. Obviously, deforestation is a huge issue because the factory farms need a lot of land, so they will destroy a lot of forest in order to make room for their farm. Water pollution is another huge issue that results from factory farming. Industrial agriculture sucks up 70% of our fresh water. There's also something called monocultures that come from chemicals and genetically modifying the produce that we make that creates antibiotic resistance and super pests. Also, of course, factory farming uses a lot of fossil fuels so that it can operate and run its facilities, and that results in carbon emissions. Also, this is always important to add and remind ourselves that we are on stolen land. We steal native land from indigenous people and we destroy it. It's completely horrible. So what can we do about all of this? We can organize against Ag-Gag laws. This would hold better accountability of factory farms so that workers and the animals can get better treatment. and our land won't be as destroyed. Shopping with your dollar to buy more humane products does help, also encouraging your friends and family to do the same. We are actually seeing this help a lot with non-dairy milk. People are buying more non-dairy options, and farms are seeing this. Another thing you can do is just continue to learn, keep learning, keep wanting to learn, keep being curious, and share any of the information that you learn with your friends and your family. I definitely would encourage you to share this video with your friends and family. Knowledge is key, and the more we know, the more powerful we can become. And lastly, definitely shop at your local farmers market. This oftentimes is more romanticized than actually done, so I encourage you to definitely get out there and shop at your local farmers market, find out when they're selling. Usually farmers markets are held outside, so throw a mask on, get your little reusable grocery bag, and support your local farmers. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode and you learned something new and you got something out of it. As always, definitely make sure you check the description bar for any additional information and the sources that were used in today's episode. Big thank you to my sister Allie for helping me script out today's episode, and thank you guys for watching and supporting this series. Definitely make sure that you are subscribed and you have your notifications on so you can get notified for next time's Makeup and Wake Up. Thank you guys.